Compound versus isolation lifts. I think both of these have their place in any training program. Now, there may be reasons to bias towards one or the other, depending on some aspects, namely of which is going to be how much time do you have to train. You know, if you're only limited to 2 training days a week and you got to do like a full body split every time, you're going to want to do compound lifts. Because the reason being that, yeah, our squat's going to be the best glute exercise ever. No. But you do see glute hypertrophy with increased squat performance, and you also get, you also get quad hypertrophy. You do get some hypertrophy in the lower back. You're probably gonna get better overall results if you do 3 sets of squats versus a set of leg extensions, a set of a glute exercise and a set of some lower back exercise. Plus the fact that you gotta spend time setting all those exercises up, and that's just gonna contribute towards wasted time during your session. So if you're limited on time, definitely stick to compound movements whenever possible. As your time available that you have to train increases, then we want to start looking at incorporating more isolation work into our training. Part of this is as a fatigue management tool. So especially if you're doing aerobic training or any kind of cardio training, one of the things we notice is the quads tend to get pretty beat up. The quads are under a lot of training stress because they're involved in practically every single, double, and triple extension movement of the lower extremity. So whether you're jumping, running, squatting, on any kind of leg extension machine, leg presses, you're constantly using the quads. So the quads do tend to be a little bit more susceptible to overtraining than some of these other muscle groups. So if you want more glute hypertrophy, but your quads are just toast because you had to run 5 miles a day before, and your quads are toast because you just had to do a huge leg session, and then you had to run 5 miles the next day. You had a day off from legs, and now you're in the gym another day, and you got another lower body day you're trying to get through. In that case, it makes a lot more sense instead of doing a glute exercise that's going to heavily recruit the quads, and it's probably going to make a lot more sense to do some more isolated glute training, especially something that's going to emphasize the posterior chain a lot, some kind of back extension variation. So it's going to train the hell out of the glutes and the hips and the lower back and all that, and the hamstrings, and you're not really going to see, it's not going to just crush your quads again for another session. The other aspect of isolation training that it can be difficult to capture with a lot of compound movements is you can train a lot of mobility and you can train outside of the sagittal plane. So sagittal plane compound movements are very effective because just the way the muscles wrap around the body, most of them wrap around the body in such a way that they can contribute force in the sagittal plane on some level. So if you do, most compound movements in the sagittal plane, it's going to work a large number of muscle groups. And that's one of the reasons why compound movements tend to be very effective on minimalist style programs. But, when we start getting into isolation work, this gives us an opportunity to get outside of the sagittal plane, and we start working in the transverse plane and the frontal plane, and we incorporate some more aspects of rotation into our training. And, that's going to go a long ways toward just generally, reducing injury risk, because, what happens when you only do sagittal plane exercises, but then, you're going through day-to-day life and you have to do some awkward movement that requires you to express a fairly large amount of force in a plane of motion that you're unfamiliar with, and you see a lot of people tweak their shoulder, their elbow, or whatever during those cases. So it is important to kind of get outside the sagittal plane with a lot of our movements. And also, it gives us the opportunity to train a lot more mobility by isolating a lot of different muscle groups. We can really focus on, taking that muscle all the way to, its most lengthened position, and then take it all the way to its most short position. So whenever I structure training nowadays, I kind of set it up so that I do all of my high force training in the context of compound movement. So I do all my heavy weight training, and I do all my general speed and power development training occurs in the context of the compound movements. And then I basically take all the isolation work, and I also double that up in the sense of I also make that my mobility training. Now it doesn't mean that isolation work is all the mobility training that you might need for people that want to get to extreme ranges of joint mobility. It may make sense to do some additional stretching or some active mobility work on top of that. If your goals are to do the splits or something, for example, all the adductor strengthening in the world isn't going to get you to the splits unless you actually train specifically for the splits. But those are a little bit more specific goals than what you would see out of just a general development program. So anyways, that's kind of my breakdown on the isolation versus compound movement debate. Hope that was helpful. I'll see you guys later.